Hi everybody, I'm gonna continue the review of Deal With It, hashtag Deal With It, Living Well with PTSD, and I left off with talking about the examination of the victim mentality. Now I think the thing that I disagree with slightly with Dr. King is, in his book, he writes that he never saw himself as a victim. In other words, his events were just something that happened to him in his past that he was able to put away and move forward. And in the course of his journey in life, and even after his recall, he still maintains that he's not a victim. And that the moment that you say that you're a victim, you lose the battle. In my opinion, I feel slightly different about that, because there's a difference between designating yourself as a victim and perpetuating a victim narrative, which is what he talks about. In other words, if somebody steals your wallet, you're not gonna go to the precinct and say, this just happened to me. I'm not a victim. My $300 was stolen from me, but I refuse to be a victim. You know what I mean? There was something taken. That's the thing. And as I was reading your book, actually, it was amazing to me because I agreed with your points about the victim narrative. The narration of yourself as a victim, meaning, oh, this happened to me, oh, me again, oh, I'm persecuted by this person because of what happened to me back then. I didn't change my sheets because I was never taught to by my narcissistic family. I was the scapegoat. I was, never taught this. Let's say I was a golden child, so I was never taught to socialize, so now I'm never going to socialize, so now I'm never going to make the effort to change because I'm a victim. So perpetuating a narrative of yourself as a chronic victim is different than admitting that you were once a victim. Because admitting that you were a victim in some cases is essential to start your journey towards health. Because when I had my episode of severe brain fog and the inability to read, I couldn't read, and I was like rereading one page 20 times. It was taking me 3 days to do something that ordinarily would take me an hour. And my mental functions were deteriorating. I didn't know what was happening to me. Days and days and months went by, and I couldn't process any new information in my head. And the only thing that helped me was looking at channels of people that were saying that they were victimized by this sociopath, this narcissist, and explaining what the Stockholm Syndrome was, what trauma bonding was, what mental manipulation was. As soon as I started to piece together these things bit by bit by bit, and I was completely obsessed, I was watching these videos all the time, my brain fog started lifting. And I started to be able to read again, and I started to be able to process new information bit by bit. And I was crying, and I was purging myself of these memories like you describe. Not within a therapeutic context, but by speaking to people on YouTube that had undergone similar events. And that victim designation helped lift the fog for me. Because if I was always pegged as the person responsible, and I was always taught to be responsible for myself. And that's very good in most cases. But when you're in an exploitative relationship, when you're in a relationship where a person is dominating you to the point where they recognize you as an object, it is necessary to make the admission that yes, it's you, it's not me, in order to start that process. And I saw this for myself. Had I not said that I was a victim, had I kept taking responsibility, had I continued on the path of making myself accountable for certain things that the sociopath in my life did, then I wouldn't, the fog wouldn't lift. And I wouldn't get better in that sense, in the short term. In the long term, it created problems because I admit that I had a victim narrative where I wasn't able to draw a line between the past and the present, and I would constantly start complaining and say, woe's me, this is not me, this is because of what happened, I developed these habits because of what happened, I'm doing this because of what happened. So when you start that dialogue with yourself where I can never change, I'm damaged goods, this is the end of the road for me, my brain is stuck. When you start doing that, then there's a problem. Then that's like a perpetuation of the problem, the continual feedback loop that you're running through your mind that's not allowing you to grow as a person, that's keeping you stuck, that's not allowing you to force yourself to develop. That's when it becomes a problem. But when you're in the fog of it and people tell you have to develop, you feel like punching them in the face because they have no idea what you're going through. The physiological symptoms are not something you can control, and you're tuning out. People are talking to you and you're somewhere else, and there's no way you can check in, and there's no way that you can read the screen, and there's no way that you can focus. And people are telling you to focus, and you, again, feel like punching them in the face because they don't understand that this is a physical... You're losing your mind. Your mind is recalibrating, and there's nothing you can do because your frontal lobe is just offline completely, and it's not within your power. It's not because you don't want to complain about your state. It's because you have to in order for that fog to lift. So you have to draw a line at some point. And most people don't draw that line, and that's when it becomes a problem. And that's when therapists become exploitative. Because if you're a therapist and you see a person is ready to move forward or develop themselves, and you continue to talk about what their parents did, or what this person did, or what their captor did, then that's not really helping them. That's just creating more problems for them, and that's really wasting their time, is what you're doing. So, in the end, I began to think as I was reading the book that, and I'm gonna read what I wrote. I think that PTSD happens to you for a reason, and I never thought I would have said this, by the way. It's your book that got me thinking about it. It is because what you left behind in the past is important, and it needs to be resolved before you can let go of the victim mentality. Speak about the Stockholm syndrome, and the importance of recognizing that in many cases the role of victim and abuser were purposefully reversed. this needs to be acknowledged in order for you to disconnect and begin to redefine your tomorrow on your terms. And the thing that you and I have in common, the thing that most people with trauma have in common, is there's no continuity between their past and their present. And they have to bridge that gap. They need to create continuity. And when I was reading your book, actually, because it was so positive and the message was so hopeful, I began to reflect on the times I fought back, even within childhood. The times that I contacted adults that helped me, or the times when teachers or mentors or guidance counselors stepped in and actually helped the situation, and that made me see myself as more of a heroine than a victim. Because it could have been a lot worse if I didn't have the correct people around me. Fortunately for me, it's not the case with everybody. But I started seeing myself as a person that had a lot of inner strength, even as a child. And I started to coddle my inner child. And I started to say, good job, I'm proud of you. Because you did everything you could under the circumstances. You stood up to the people that were bullying you. And you did everything that you could at the time. So that made me reintegrate and kind of create a different scaffolding in the past than I had prior to reading your book. Because rather than seeing myself as somebody that was attacked, end of sentence, I saw myself as somebody that fought back and still has the character to fight back and knew that what was happening was wrong. And somebody that can continue to stand their ground and has regained that consciousness. So the recall actually brought me back to that point when I was young and I knew that something was wrong and I fought it. And I listened to mentors along the way. I had a great science teacher that helped me. So I started to see even the past in a more positive light, which is what people need to start to do. They need to start to kind of reconfigure what happened, if they can see some light or some lessons that they had, even in their childhood, where they stood up to the abuser. Some light within that will help them realize how strong they are, how resilient. So then John goes back into his toolbox. And he talks about the different tools that we now have to have in order to build a better future for ourselves. First of all, we need to admit that society is bullshit. Which I love. Because it is bullshit. Look at what sociopaths get away with. I stopped watching the news because I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of the controversy and the constant fighting and bickering. I've seen enough of that within my own life to know that it's bullshit. And owning that and saying, I'm proud of the fact that I know that all of this is bullshit. And I kind of knew for a while that it was. And creating a new normal for ourselves and sticking to it. You cannot accommodate every situation that is around you. It's impossible. Why you have to create new normals for yourself and people that come within your sphere. Hold them to account. Create a paradigm of normal behavior. Don't give too much. Look if the person is genuinely interested in you. Look if the person is willing to give of themselves to you. And that's necessary. And it's necessary to own when you make mistakes. Don't call yourself a victim. If you pick the wrong person to bring into your inner circle, reflect on it. Become future-centered. Forward-thinking vision of the future. In other words, next video.